almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Greetings and salutations, friends. It is I, your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. What a wild ride it's been. We got some crazy breaking news, worthy of the most absurd coverage. In a bold and brave move, Donald Trump has told members of administrations to be total chicken shits and avoid testifying and, speaking the truth to a congressional investigation. The irony, of course, being that they're touting left and right that they've got nothing to hide. And as they love to point out in regards to other investigations, because they love to investigate, if they got nothing to hide, why are they hiding? Curiously, Steve Bannon is the only person who's taken Trump's suggestion really hardcore and is currently totally avoiding the subpoena, which is great because then we'll get to waste 3 years worth of legal shenanigans fighting and arguing about whether or not Steve Bannon will ever, make an appearance before that investigative body. Of course, the stupid part is that they're apparently the Team Bannon's core legal argument for avoiding the subpoena is executive privilege. I guess no one taught him in however many years he was in school and however many years he was pseudo involved in government that only a sitting president currently in office can invoke executive privilege. Executive privilege is a legal tool that belongs to the office, not the individuals involved. Call me crazy, but that's the best of my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. I realize I could be wrong. But to the best of my civic understanding, executive privilege can only be invoked by a sitting president because it is a tool of the office. And yet Trump and his cohorts are waving some kind of executive privilege, don't talk to me flag as if it's going to mean anything in the long run. The only good it does them is it begins the endless shuffleboard game of delay, and distract. Quite ironically, I think, in my humble opinion, Trump is submitting himself to a legal deposition today, despite all his hoopla talk of not submitting, of not consenting to that sort of thing. I don't think they've issued. This is a different investigation, right? I don't think that the Congress has issued a subpoena for him. To the best of my understanding, he is going in. Might very well already be, given that I'm on Pacific and he's on Eastern. Might very well be in this moment being deposed under oath for a lawsuit that stems from an incident from before he was inaugurated. Some protest, I could be wrong, my friends. Always double check the details. But from the reporting I've seen, there were some protesters exercising their God-given free speech protesting rights, which, everybody loves until they don't, in front of Donald Trump's office, I think, at the Trump Tower, right, in New York. And the person named in the lawsuit is one of Trump's bodyguards, apparently a long-standing bodyguard. His name I saw in some reporting. I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember what it is. It's kind of irrelevant. The lawsuit stipulates that as an employee of Trump, his actions opened Trump up to legal accountability. And this bodyguard, this security officer, supposedly got a little too rough with these protesters while attempting to disarm them of their protest signs. It's quite the interesting and ironic full circle sort of lawsuit, given that the counter position, the other fullest extreme is the investigations into January 6th, right? In which Trump supporters, or according to Trump supporters, a bunch of Antifa raided the Capitol and, patriotically defecated in hallways as a means of attempting to stop the certification of the election by the members of Congress and the vice president. The whole kaleidoscope of crazy and the way in which Trump specifically, and of course the administration and his sycophants have responded to it, is illustrative of the theatrical, the political theater that all of this is. One of the scariest sort of aha moments I had, probably on January 7th, the day after the insurrection, just sort of contemplating it. And this is this. And I wrote this down back then, and I meant to turn it into a meme. And I think I lost track of the note because I'd written it down physically on a piece of paper somewhere. And then I found it again, and I transferred it to like a digital note, put it into my workflow, and then lost track of it and never made the meme. And then made the meme, and then I haven't posted it yet. But I genuinely and authentically had this thought back in, where is it? I have it now somewhere in meme form. But the evolution of the psychological reaction, or the way in which the GOP and the Trump machine, the Trump, what do you call it? The Trump cult, the Trump phenomena has responded to and rationalized January 6th is beyond astounding. I mean, mountains and mountains of commentary have already been made. Not the least of which by myself, but there's this thing that is really quite troubling about it, that, to the best of my understanding, now where did I put? Is it here? Somewhere. There it is. I'm allow myself to quote myself from January 7th. Quote, "Good Lord, it just hit me. In the minds of the most true believers of the Trumtopian base, January 6th will slowly become their own personal real-life V for Vendetta living memory mythology. Or a, quote, totally fake news event that they blame on someone else." Little did I know when I was capturing this thought that they would resort to and perpetuate both things at once, which is where we are with that situation. The psychological pretzels that the base and its collective voice of defendants and or dismissers of January 6th, it's just astounding, right? Like, and of course, an eloquent cartoon has already been made of it. They did go through this bizarre progression of being very proud. I mean, they made merch, right? This cannot be denied. It's often ignored and neglected on the internet when discussions are had, as I've seen in multiple contexts. But the Trump base made merchandise ahead of January 6th, in anticipation for January 6th, right? They made their own merch and sold it to themselves about how awesome January 6th was going to be. Evidenced by the fact that people in the merch were walking up to the Capitol and making commentary on their own live streams. Now, if it was all a bunch of Antifa, how come all those live streams didn't belong to a bunch of Antifa people? All of those live streams belonged to stalwart, well-established Trump-based people. I mean, that's just a reality, right? Were there Antifa folks there? Perhaps there were. Were there undercover investigators? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Is it all now a fake news, deep state, black bag operation of fakeness? I mean, like I've pointed out before, folks, the greatest hoax of postmodern psychological political theater is convincing oneself, allowing the system to convince you to dismiss anything you disagree with and anything you're told to disagree with as a hoax. Because that slippery slope becomes this fractal hoaxification of everything. Now, where does that end? That just spirals out of control until you cannot believe your own self. You start doubting your own consciousness. And that's problematic. But I digress. The pattern of behavior is absurdly clear. And that is of people trying to prevent, to hide, to obfuscate information from coming to light. Now, should they be afforded the grace of innocent until proven guilty? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean put blinders on and ignore everything. That doesn't mean pretend, despite all the apparent evidence, that nothing happened. That means if you're going to investigate, actually investigate. And one of the problems I have isn't so much that that for example that Steve Bannon is refusing to. I mean, sure, let him try and get away with that. What I have is that somehow the Democrats always manage to, as I've pointed out before, fumble the ball. Sometimes with eloquent and quite distracting grace that makes it sound like they're working really hard, but really they're just fumbling the ball really fumbly, and letting the other team, pick it up. And so the thing that concerns me is not whether or not Steve Bannon refuses to respond to the subpoena, but it's whether or not those who are issuing the subpoena go after him in the most efficient way, right? As opposed to the most absurdly time-luxurious way. As I was contemplating someone's recent reporting, I don't remember who, and it's kind of irrelevant, because I'd asked myself this question before I came across this bit of journalism, but the investigative body had other options before them besides immediately turning to criminal prosecution, right? So they issued a subpoena, Bannon didn't show up, and then they chose the hardest objective possible, which is to go the steepest route, right? They've got to vote on this thing, they got to send that to the full House, then they got to send that to the DOJ, and then the DOJ's got to send, and then, it's multiple steps, wherein at some point, one would be deeply concerned that the GOP would sort of exude its influence and sort of get the whole thing derailed. Whereas, if they pursued a civil pursuit, they could have taken more immediate action. In fact, one tool that was at their disposal that they quite, in my opinion, conveniently forgot or ignored or neglected was that there is literally a man-at-arms for the Congress. There's like a chief of the law, like the chief law enforcement officer in the whole buildup, and this sergeant-at-arms has the capacity to, under civil law conduct an arrest and seize someone to bring them in to testify. Now, that has not been used in some nearly 100 years, according to what I've come across, but it's not unusable. And if they really wanted to bring Steve Bannon in, as opposed to set up a 3 or 5 year long legal battle over the nonsensical claim that he somehow has executive privilege now, despite barely having been a part of the administration, no longer being a part of the administration at the time of January 6th, and no longer being in government now, and Trump no longer being the president, right? But because of the way that the appeal systems work, this could drag on forever. Whereas, to the best of my understanding, and I realize I could be wrong about this, if they'd gone this other route, he could be brought before Congress under arrest for civil disobedience and, obstruction of justice. And, that's the wrong term, not obstruction of justice, but what is it when a contempt of court, but contempt of the Congress? There we go. Under a civil contempt of Congress charge, they could have issued an arrest warrant and brought him in and forced him to testify. But they're not. Just as they have, time and time again, made the weird fumble the football call, which doesn't progress things and which allows for a cacophony of distractionary Yahooism to get away with getting away with things. Now, hopefully, the reality that Trump is up against a legal order that he cannot squirm out from underneath of, right? Like the judge in the Bronx, I believe, which considered the matter, issued an order, a legally binding order, that Trump has to comply with this deposition, which lays the groundwork for future court orders for Trump to testify. And mind you, this is the first of a minimum of 10 different civil cases against him, right? And those are all separate from, got nothing to do with, in terms of practical legal realities, with the onslaught of criminal and political investigations, looking into everything from his fundraising to his involvement in organizing January 6th. The tragedy here, folks, is just how efficiently all of this political theater has ripped a seam in the American cultural fabric, and how quick to dismiss one another and fight one another and disregard one another the political bases have jumped into it, right? And the irony is, as the two parties blame each other, as the two bases blame each other for everything from the rise in poverty and crime to gas prices and inflation, things continue to go unresolved, and only the squeakiest and noisiest of political problems get any attention, which is, I dare say, not exactly the way in which a functioning democratic republic ought to operate. But who am I to say? Who am I? What do I know? Let us take a moment, though, to pause and hand things over to DJ Zed. DJ Zed, please fire us up a little something. Hit Here's a humorous little track entitled When Robots Invented Dance, a Tech House, Volume 2, 101 Remix live to tape performance, recorded earlier for you in front of a robotic studio audience from another dimension. Enjoy. You can just imagine seeing those robots the day they invented dancing for the very first time. Thanks, DJ Zed. That was an interesting track. In other news, it's being reported, and surprise, surprise, 10% of the wealthiest of the wealthy own nearly 90% of all the stock in America. Like literal stock ownership. While constantly marketed to us as some tool for the middle class to improve their financial situation, it's really sort of like a playground casino for the wealthiest of the wealthy to, ride a roller coaster thrill ride that to them means nothing, but when it crashes its lowest lows, destroys the nest eggs of middle and lower income families that are encouraged to play roulette. So consider that as you go about your daily business. And then in a sad bit of news, because, it's always sad when people pass away, Colin Powell, former Secretary of State, and someone that almost was the first Black president of the United States, could have been. The window of opportunity was sort of fomenting around him. He might have, right? What could have been is, as Giuliani awkwardly points out in some tweet today, he passed away apparently from complications of the non-existent hoax virus, which I think most of the people claiming it was a hoax have now backpedaled away from and have transitioned to, well, yeah, maybe it's real, but other things are, et cetera, et cetera. Goalposts be moving, folks. But I digress. It's a sad day in regards to just, he is just one of many who continue to pass away at alarming rates. In fact, I meant to have numbers for you, and of course I totally blanked on that just now during the musical break. Let me see if I can find the thing. Where's the site that I like to use? World O Meters. Pardon me, folks, as I stumble through my own silliness. So, condolences to family and friends, not just for Mr. Powell, but also for everyone who's lost someone, because people die every day, right? Of all kinds of things. But here we go. It's, for those of you who are not familiar, go head on over to worldometers.info, a third-party, independent, nonpartisan website tracking multiple sources to create an aggregate number, which I have found pretty consistent. In other words, while there's always a little bit of variance in all numbers reported across various outlets, this reporting has seemed to be pretty strong because they compile various sources and cross-index things and all kinds of stuff. Do your own due diligence, check them out, see if you think it makes sense to you. But total cases, if I'm not mistaken, this is total cases since the beginning of the pandemic. 241,610,365 with 4,916,725 deaths. So, you know, it's a lot of people. Taking a look at yesterday's completed numbers, according to this site, the U.S. is no longer number one in terms of deaths per day. It's now trailing deep in the back half of the top 10 at number 8. Tragically, the following countries are the top 7 for yesterday's death count: India, Turkey, Iran, Ukraine, Romania, Mexico, and Russia. And while there's plenty of other things in the world killing plenty of other people, folks, this one is one of the dumbestly most easily preventable. Because if any of the fundamental science is near accurate, it can, could, should, would be easily brought to an end if we had only quarantined correctly. But put a pin in that. I've talked about it before at length in the show, and I'll talk about it again, I'm sure, in an upcoming episode. As I have tons of issues that I've got on a backlog. Off the top of my head, I still owe you guys a whole slew of episodes, including a reading of the Constitution episode where we discuss, you know, why the Constitution is such an amazing document and why it's got some flaws that must be addressed. And the long delayed voting rights episode where I talk about some of my bizarro out of the box, you know, outside of the box ideas as to how we could end the debate, right, about voter fraud once and for all. Because no matter which side you're on, the debate is now entrenched and seemingly intractable. Because both sides believe the other side are caught up in believing in a lie. How do you solve that problem if each side is convinced that the other side's statements are absolutely founded on fabrications, right, and falsehoods? And you got to step back and look at both sides and agree that it cannot be true that only one side has absolute truth and the other side is absolute falsehood. That, like, that statement doesn't stand up to reality, to how the world actually works. And we got to, like, get people to step far enough back collectively to see that, both sides are entrenched in a sort of unsolvable mental dilemma, which pivots them against one another, all of which prevents any reasonable solution from truly taking place and being made manifest. So I invite you, friends, to pause wherever you come from. Whatever political attitude you think is most righteous, whatever political position you think is most gloriously true, pause for a moment and step back and remind yourself of the broader contexts involved. Remind yourself of the realities that, pardon the pun, trump political vagaries, right? The realities, and I really lament the fact that the president has ruined the vocabulary word, because there's meaningfulness in that, and his name has rendered it useless. But I digress. Lots of news to be tracking, an overwhelming amount of it is, alarming and disturbing and frustrating and maddening and, frankly, on the side, on the depressing side of things. And I encourage you, my friends, always to take a deep breath, take a long meditation session, and transcend the narratives, because it is in the narratives that we get lost. Spiraling out of control myself. As this whole collection of events which have defined the last 2 years, the intersection of the pandemic and the Trump-topian dystopia, continue to unpack as this convergence of events continues to unfold before us. We have a renewed opportunity to transcend our own shenanigans, to heal ourselves and each other intellectually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and to unite in pursuit of solutions, of actual healing, of actual functional change and evolutionary adaptive, upgrading, for lack of a better term there, evolutionary upgrading of our systems, of our way of thinking, of our politics, and of our business models, etc., etc. All of these things must evolve, in my humble opinion. We can't entrench ourselves in antiquated mechanisms, because it's bad enough that they're antiquated. There's still mechanisms, right, which have flaws, which have corruption, etc., etc. And we can't entrench ourselves in mechanisms that blind us to each other, to the conflict that we're perpetuating for no reason, and to the higher callings that surround us in this place we call reality. For more on that, stay tuned. If you're new to the show, welcome. I invite you to join me in a journey both forward and backwards through time. The backlog of episodes should not seem like an overwhelming mountain of content you'll never get through, but rather part of the daily adventure of discourse, right? So take a moment to cleanse the palate and breathe, my friend, and take a moment to zen out for yourself, and then hopscotch around my 5 years worth of episodes, where you will find a confluence of real-time commentary in the events of the past 5 years, and broad picture metaphysical, spiritual discourse at a scope that is transcendent of the current time frame, which will have meaning as valuable to you now as it may have felt to those listening live at the time. That's the way the show is meant to work. It's sort of an interlacing of the past 5 years worth of content and the next 5 years worth of content. So join me in doing so. Check out the things on the pin board collection. And for those of you who don't know what that is, whenever I say stick a pin in it, I mean literally imagine that like cork board of content in that conspiracy theory meme where the guy is waving his arms around in the air explaining something to his friends. And then every time those kinds of themes are referred to the board, arrange them in your mind and do some of the sleuthing yourself. As always, friends, I don't want you to tune in and listen and believe in my ideas or my words blindly. I want you to engage in critical thinking for yourself and consider what is essentially just my humble opinion, and consider it. And then share your own. Come on down to Facebook and find the Almost Daily Zencast official Facebook page and share your thoughts, questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, etc. It has been an honor and a pleasure speaking to you this morning. As always, I thank you for tuning in. If the world and its craziness has gotten a wee bit too much, and discussing it has gotten to be wee too exhausting for you, friends, trust me, it has for me at times. Please join me on the lighter side of things on my most recent addition to my collection of online projects over at twitch.tv/Mr. Zeppo for a little bit of almost daily variety, live stream gaming, reviews, and just deep immersion into gaming fun, featuring games available for the iPad. If you appreciate what I talk about here in this podcast or any of the other projects that I host online, please head on over to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and check out the ways that you can support this and all the projects. Until next time, it is my fond duty to bid you adieu. What sentence was that? I don't know why that came out that way. But I just want to say thanks for tuning in. And I wish you the best in your day, your week, your month, and may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Until next time, this has been Good Morning Trumptopia, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.
That sound effect has not aged well. And for context, I was being mildly ironic.